This is the story of a new world. A world that begins in the mysterious and invisible universe of atoms and molecules, which combine in countless numbers to form everything we see and touch. It is the story of how man, investigating nature, has learned from nature's examples to join these same atoms and molecules to form substances never before seen under the sun. These new materials are the world of plastics, the world that nature forgot.
We discovered these miracle materials. We didn't ask the right questions. We just said, oh, wow, look what this stuff can do. It's so cool. And now we're realizing we made some big mistakes.
Microplastics are possibly the most serious type of pollutant our society has ever created. These invisible particles have been found on the highest mountains, in the deepest ocean sediments. And now we're finding microplastics wherever we look in the human body. And once these tiny particles are in our bodies, they're oozing their toxic ingredients on a minute-by-minute basis.
We know that the chemicals that are in plastics could create health problems like obesity or diabetes or heart disease or fertility problems or possibly even cancer.
It's a conundrum we find ourselves in. We've got to figure out how to deal with that conundrum.
Every day, I start my day by putting plastic in my eyes. And it's crazy because I literally see the world through a plastic lens. I started investigating plastic about 15 years ago. That's when people started looking at the great garbage patch. And then we started noticing that it was impacting animals. One of the first things that we saw was the bird carcass. It was shocking. There was probably as much plastic in the bird as there were bones left in the bird. So for me, it was realizing that a lot of plastic was disguised as food, and a lot of animals have started eating a lot of those plastics. But in fact, human beings have much more contact with plastics than your average animal will. I think about brushing my teeth with plastic bristles. They're in the dust, so we're actually breathing microplastics. One study found that it's in about 83% of the drinking water that comes out of our taps. And of course, microplastics are in the food that we eat. We are slowly turning into plastic people. And scientists have been studying plastics and the impacts of plastics on our environment, on the planetary body. But what we really need to start doing now is looking at the impacts on the human body. And that's what I'm gonna do.
Plastic, plastic, plastic. What are plastics? Are they animal, vegetable, or mineral?
Plastic is, by and large, a derivative of petrochemicals. So it's not a coincidence that many of the big plastics companies in the world are actually branch plants of big oil companies. We pump the oil out of the ground. We crack that oil into different types of chemicals. Those chemicals are polymerized so that those molecules are connected to create different types of plastic. That whole process creates its own pollution, including climate-warming gases. Those many types of plastics are made into different products, are shipped worldwide. One of the things that's hard to wrap your brain around when it comes to the plastics industry is how astronomically huge the numbers are. Over 1.5 billion plastic bottles being bought around the planet every day. 2 million plastic bags are used every minute on Earth. The end result of this is about 400 million tons of plastics that are created every year. Almost half of all plastic produced goes into single-use items. Today, even the biggest oil companies in the world are admitting that we're going to be using less oil in the years ahead. And if you can't burn oil in cars, if that market is disappearing over the next few decades, what are you going to do with that product? Well, increasing the plasticization of the human life is where their oil is going to go. Plastic companies are talking about tripling plastic use and production over the next couple of decades. So it's a double whammy. There's a product that is contributing to the global warming problem and creating this toxic exposure problem.
Some of the work that we're doing here at the University of Minnesota is urban air sampling. We're finding particles in our sampler with snow and rain. Plastic is just everywhere. And this is the evolution of this discipline, is that we started off looking at big things, but now we've got these teeny, teeny, tiny little flakes. And we're trying to understand how these materials flow. And then, yeah, where do they eventually come to rest? And if they do, how long? I mean, you look at something like a plastic bag, a cereal bag, and when you look really closely at it under an electron microscope, you can suddenly see like all these little particles that are just about ready to shed. That's a little bit of the rolled up adhesive. Yeah, imagine having that for breakfast.
It's so good to meet you too, at last.
Yeah,
hey?
come on in.
Thank you so much. And looking forward to finding out what you actually discovered in my home.
So what we do is we take a sample and we reduce the volume, and then we stain it. And that causes the synthetic polymers to fluoresce. So this is from your house dust. Some of these are fluorescing. They're pretty easy to spot, yeah. And so those are very likely synthetic polymers.
And this is just a speck of dust.
I know.
So if this is from one speck,
How much
I
is in
can't
the
even
house?
begin to imagine how much is in the house.
Right, right. I'm fortunate that I've been able to kind of test some things just for fun. This is some dried mucus from the nose of a small person that I happen to live with. And
This is a booger.
yes, yeah. Look at this. Look at all that. I mean, there's red threads in there. That would definitely not be a human hair. There are so many different kinds of contaminants that are in consumer products. We just assume that they've all been completely tested and that they're completely safe. And we bring them into our homes and we live alongside them. And we think that they're doing us absolutely no harm, when that isn't necessarily the case. There's so little transparency.
This is plastic.
Yeah, it's a dollhouse. We are conducting an experiment and the entire population is involved. We can try and kind of safeguard our home, but it's a global commons issue. It's everywhere. You go out into the world and you're going to be exposed to it. I've taken some samples of snow that's fallen in my backyard and found tiny fragments of plastic particles in it. And when I came home, I told my children to not catch snowflakes.
It's hard to wrap your head around, but virtually every molecule of plastic ever created still exists somewhere on Earth in some stage of degradation, because this stuff never disappears. It just goes from being larger pieces of litter to tinier and tinier particles that become microscopic.
Definition is just a piece of plastic less than 5 millimeters in size, so a pencil eraser and smaller.
Somebody buys the bottle is used for a few minutes, the bottle's discarded. Once it's in the environment, is broken down by sunlight, by the action of waves, by the passing of time. It starts to degrade into these tiny particles that are so light, and they come down in the rain, they accumulate in our food, and we're absorbing them into our own bodies.
One of the largest sources of microplastics into the environment is mismanaged waste. Aside from large items breaking into smaller items, one of the most common sources is paint from buildings and boats, tire dust from cars, bikes, planes.
As we wear clothing that's increasingly plastic, those fibers shed, go down the drain, wind up in the local lakes and rivers, and those fibers are a big source of microplastics as well.
There are estimates that suggest that anywhere from 10 to 20 million metric tons of plastic are leaving our land and going out into the ocean each year. Now, some of that will stay on the surface and float and travel quite far. Some of it, as it breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, can go up into the atmosphere and travel globally that way. Some of it will sink to the bottom. It is eaten by almost every level of the food chain. And now we're starting to understand that microbes colonize it. And so in and of itself becomes this habitat. So it's atmospheric currents, global dust cycles, the water cycle, the carbon cycle. It's sort of become part of these planetary cycles.
This part of the Mediterranean Sea is the most polluted part in terms of plastic pollution. There could be many different sources, but the first thing is dumping of the plastic waste into the Mediterranean Sea. This beach receives between 30 to 35 kilograms of plastics per day per kilometer. That's really high. Global northern country is also responsible for this pollution. Those countries has clean environment, exporting plastic waste to countries like Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam. We call it waste colonialism. So here we can see the microplastics on this seed. You know, anything we produce contaminated with plastic. We are living on the plastisphere. We are producing our food in the plastic culture way.
This is the starting point of the entrance in the involvement of plastic inside the food chain.
So, as you see, there one layer just covered soil. Under this sheet, there is another plastic here. This is for irrigation. They use single-use pipe, as we see here. This is from last year, shredded because of the tractor. The idea is making harvesting time shorter. The cost of removal is really high. So that's why they are just living in the field, because no one cares. There is no rules for this. There is no legislation. This is soil or plastic? Plastic soil. There is no way to clean this microplastic from environments. The world does not deserve a single-use application because the world is not single-use. We are producing poisonous food. We are poisoning ourselves with our hand.
Okay, so I'm just getting ready to go to Rochester because they want some samples to test the microplastics in my body. This is the shit that I do for science, literally. I sent fecal samples to you guys to test for microplastics, and with bated breath, I've been sort of wondering what the results were.
When we get a sample, the first thing that we need to do is and hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is going to eat away at the organics and leave the plastics. So once we get those off, we get them onto filters so that we can look at them under optical microscope to look for in fragments and fibers and foams. So we take it from there and use an IR microscope to positively identify what is the chemical makeup of the compounds. What we're looking at is the optical microscope right now. So you can see this grid,
Right.
And so this grid is 3 millimeters in size. So we get over here in the corner, this blackish, bluish type of fiber. A fiber as well, another one. Coming to here, and we can see this very small fragment. So we're talking about in the order of tens of microns. It came up with a very clear fit to being the polypropylene. So disposable masks.
Candy wrappers, salad bags. Polypropylene tends to be the more crinkly stuff.
So like this fiber that we saw here, it was cotton. So we're seeing a number of cotton ones come down here, and this is being rayon, a semi-synthetic type of fiber. Come down further here, and we have polyester, synthetic clothing, any fleece.
It's pretty shocking because I'm still processing the fact that this stuff is really in my body.
Yeah. And we don't know how this came out too, right? So there may be some that was retained that we're not measuring, right?
Do you think everybody has microplastics?
Yes.
Everybody. Yeah, no doubt.
No doubt.
No doubt. Because it's everywhere. So every single person is exposed.
Right now, I'm going in for a mammogram and also going in for an ultrasound. There's quite a bit of cancer in my family, unfortunately. 3 of my mom's sisters have had cancer. My dad's brother had cancer. My dad is currently getting tested for cancer, and I get tested every year because I'm in the high-risk category. I don't think I'm different from very many people. I remember growing up and cancer was this big, scary C word, and now just about everybody I know has somebody with cancer in their family. We don't actually know the exact causes. It could be so many different things. It could be the pollutants in the air. It could be the meat that people are eating. It could be the plastics.
There are tens of thousands of chemicals in commerce, many of which are used to make plastics. And virtually none of these chemicals have been tested for safety.
We don't really know how many are present in a plastic item. We don't know the types of chemicals that are present in a plastic because that's proprietary information for the business. And so these are all trade secrets so that people don't get the recipe from another competitor for what's in their plastic. That's what we're working on right now. We're looking to see if this particle ends up in this part of the body and we know that it has these kinds of chemicals with it, how much of a dose will we get? And what kind of impact would that be if we're continually dosing ourselves with chemicals like that?
The study of toxicity of microplastics is in its infancy, but we're beginning to learn that they are a transport mechanism for getting bad chemicals into people. A key part of this story is the human endocrine system. We have glands in us that make hormones. And those hormones, they guide the development of virtually everything. How many fingers we have, is our brain wired properly, can we reproduce? There's an amplification process that can make one molecule have a signal that's up to 100,000, if not 1 million times bigger than the original signal. And that means that very small doses can have really big effects. Some chemicals in plastics hack that signaling system.
So there's any number of chemicals that are deliberately put in different types of plastic that we know are disruptive to our hormones. Chemicals like phthalates, for instance, which are very, very common in plastics. They're a softener. Phthalates will take a rigid material and they'll make it more flexible. BPA is a very well-known chemical now, still very common. know now there's a link between these chemicals and human disease like breast cancer, prostate cancer. We know that a lot of these chemicals trigger obesity.
Another condition that is now tied firmly to chemicals leaching out of plastics is infertility. If you simply take the data that they have gathered over sperm count and how much it's declined, and you just project it forward into the future, by 2045, a lot of young adult males will not be able to reproduce the normal old-fashioned way. But there's another twist to this, which is that the plastics that are used during the process of artificial reproduction interfere with artificial reproduction. So people should pay attention to this. It's happening today.
Vai. Guardiamo quanto poi. Sì, ma te lo devo fare, non sarà uno stiratore, insomma te lo devo fare, partito buono. Bellino, bellino.
25.
Auguri, cara.
Auguri, è bello, È bellissimo, Allen?
C'è un sacco di capelli. Benvenuto, Allen.
È carino. La placenta ha una funzione fondamentale, è un organo transitorio. È un organo dei bambini, non delle mamme. Grazie. Quindi noi trovammo delle donne che ci donarono, ci regalarono la loro placenta e quindi noi trovammo in queste 4 placente 12 pezzi di plastica. E quindi di queste 12 particelle alcune erano di polipropilene. Abbiamo detto, ma se la plastica sta nella placenta, può darsi che la plastica stia all'interno del latte delle mamme. Siamo andati a guardare 34 mamme e in più di 2/3 di queste mamme noi abbiamo trovato plastica nel latte materno. Ma ok, la plastica sta nella placenta, ma dove? E hanno scoperto che le plastiche stanno dentro le cellule. Cioè la cellula, che è la costituente fondamentale della vita, è a sua volta costituita da tanti pezzi più piccoli. Noi abbiamo scoperto che quando la microplastica sta dentro questi pezzi più piccoli, vicino, li distrugge. E questo è molto triste se avviene in un bambino in formazione, perché cambia il modo di esprimersi del DNA. Il problema non è la plastica è uno strumento straordinario, utilissimo. Con la plastica si possono fare cose meravigliose. Le protesi del cuore, le protesi dell'anca, tanti strumenti. La vita oggi sul pianeta non sarebbe concepibile senza plastica. Il problema è come noi utilizziamo la plastica, come utilizziamo questa risorsa meravigliosa, facendo cose stupide come le bottiglie che contengono le bibite gasate oppure l'acqua. Se noi guardiamo il mondo come un luogo che ha delle risorse per diventare ricchi, non vediamo più la meraviglia, non vediamo più la bellezza di questo mondo. Noi stessi diventiamo parte della tecnica. Siamo utili finché possiamo fare qualcosa, finché stiamo dentro il paradigma economico. Cioè di cambiare il nostro modo di vedere il mondo. Cioè, quando la Coca-Cola, che hanno miliardi e miliardi e miliardi di dollari di prodotto e sanno cosa stanno facendo, perché loro sanno la verità, distruggono il mondo di tanti, di tutti noi, per gli interessi di pochi, noi dobbiamo ribellarci. L'obiettivo dei nostri studi è la ribellione, ribellarsi.
I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department in the hospital. Today I'm exactly 36 weeks. This is our first child. I don't know if it's because of the hormones, but sometimes I have periods where I would think oh, is this the world where I want to bring up my child and everything seems bad and bad for you and the choices that you're making. Yeah, that's sometimes a bit difficult. I'm a frequently plastic user. I have my little plastic water bottle. It's handy, but when I was really paying attention, I was like, whoa, we use a lot of plastic. So what kind of effects that could have on developing of a child.
So good to meet you.
You too. Welcome to Holland.
Thank you. So you got to tell me, how does a pediatrician start studying microplastics?
As pediatricians, we're used to treating illnesses in children, but we also train to prevent illness because prevention is always better than cure.
Right.
And about 25 years ago, we started doing research on dioxins, for instance, that are formed with the incineration of plastics. And dioxins can have an effect on basically development of all sorts of organ systems in your body, with your brain, your teeth, your lungs. We took a step further and we said, hey, what about the plastics that are being used, especially the hormone-disrupting chemicals? What we've seen in the last 1 to 2 generations is a major increase in the number of breast cancers, prostate cancers, testicular cancers, and even thyroid cancers. So what we're seeing is the correlation between the use of these and the production of the plastics and the increase in the cancers. What concerns me is that a child is not only being exposed like we are, but a fetus is developing at a far greater rate, and not only the organs, but all the tissue, it's all developing. The consequences are far greater because you're being born with a problem.
These babies are being born pre-polluted in a sense.
Yes, we are a product of our environment.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
I think it's very important to realize that you can't do anything about the fact that there are plastics in your body. That's the society we live in.
Yeah, it's very difficult because I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, you do the best you can to live healthily, to nurture your baby, and more than that you can't do. And I think the next question is probably, what are the effects of that on the health and development of the child, or the fetus and the child? And I think that's a very pertinent question also. And it's a question we don't have an answer to yet. And we'll probably only get to know that 10, 20, 30 years further when these children grow up. That's unfortunately the history of chemical exposures in people. It's always reactive. A lot of these effects we'll only see many years later. Boys that are born today will only know if they have fertility problems when they start to have kids. Are we willing to risk a generation to see if it's there or not? I think that's playing with fire.
Right now, the system is designed to let the experiment play out on people. And only once the signal becomes so big that you can't ignore it do they begin to ask questions. That's wrong. We need to ask questions before something becomes so valuable to the chemical industry that they'll do anything they can to defend it. And they will do close to anything to defend one of their billion-dollar products.
At the Nylon Trade Fair, you can be sure there is something to suit all tastes. On show for the first time at the fair are nylon carpets and rugs. Make the word nylon plural, and even the dumbest of blondes will know what you mean.
What we do know of people that work in an environment with high levels of nylon, like people working in a nylon factory, 30% of these people have problems with their lungs. So that's why we took this model of living mini lungs. And when you put these cells, lung cells, into a culture dish, we could see what would happen if there are microplastics present. Yes.
Yeah, that's the control.
We take the cells that line the airways, epithelial cells. We take these from a human. Wow.
Oh, nice. Quite big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're huge.
Yeah.
Okay. So these big bubbles, those are structures that we call airways. So these are pretty. There's no other word for it. They're just nice. And these are actually alive, right? It's not a piece of tissue that you cut and then put under a microscope. These are still living. They're still, well, they don't have a heart, and there's not a beating heart, but they're cells. They're trying to form a structure. We also have nylon 6.6 particles. Oh, wow. It looks really different. Yeah, but there's absolutely nothing here. So what is dramatic to me is that there are no pretty structures. There's nothing. There are no bubbles. They're all gone. All this gray mass that you see are nylon particles. So the chemical that is leaching out of nylon 6.6, it causes this total lack of growth of mini lungs. That's a process that our lungs are really good at. Is like when they get hurt, they repair themselves. And if you have a lot of these fibers in your lungs, you cannot repair. I'm particularly worried about carpets because they cover a big surface, right? And we walk on them all the time. So it means that all these fibers keep being released by it. Just imagine lying on a carpet, being close to these fibers and breathing them in.
Would you consider microplastics a form of air pollution?
Yes, definitely. They don't degrade. So because we keep on using more and more and more, and it keeps on getting into an environment, it means it's accumulating. But what in 50 years if we keep up this plastic use and we don't do anything about it? We might then be reaching critical levels.
Plastics made possible the material world that we live in now. They are the bones, the skin, the connective tissue. With the arrival of synthetic plastics, we suddenly were able to sort of transcend what nature has been giving us for thousands of years.
This compregnated slab is strong enough to bear the weight of a 4-ton elephant. Believe it or not.
And we transcended that basic problem that natural resources have limited supplies. One of the ones that was a major cause of concern was ivory.
In this London warehouse, where tusks have been coming in since the days of Charles II, the latest consignments are cut up for the first stage of their transformation into ivory-backed brushes, mirrors, and combs.
Ivory was used for all sorts of things, for buttons, for decorative items, piano keys, and for billiards. John Wesley Hyatt, an amateur inventor, came up with this material he called celluloid. It was malleable, it was moldable, it was mass producible. It kind of leveled the playing field for consumption. The next big move was Bakelite, the first real synthetic molecule. And it's a great electrical insulator. It was the early 20th century, and all across the country, people are laying down electrical wire, and they need insulation for that wire. And Bakelite becomes this very successful plastic. It goes into industrial uses. It goes into consumer products. Because it was machinable, because it was mass producible, you could use it to make all sorts of cool, curvy shapes. It was the machine-age plastic, automobile-age plastic. In the 20s and 30s, you had the rise of the petrochemical industry. Petroleum companies and chemical companies were aligning and wanting to figure out something to do with the waste products of processing of their products. That became the groundwork for the modern plastics industry and the invention of most of the big plastics that we know today. Companies like Dow or Mobil or DuPont had teams of industrial chemists who were just noodling around with chemicals, trying to figure out cool stuff that they could do, coming up with materials for which there was no immediate need or demand, except for nylons, which people have been looking for a long time. People wanted a substitute for silk stockings because they were expensive and they didn't last very long.
It was indeed lucky for us that the men of plastics had labored so long and well, for suddenly we found ourselves at war.
Come World War II, the military turns to that nascent industry.
Faced with a critical metal shortage and unprecedented production demands, armament manufacturers immediately turned to plastics for assistance. And the kingdom of plastics responded with remarkable speed and ingenuity.
Now, instead of nylons, they turn all their production over to making parachutes. Acrylic was being used to make bomb turrets. So during the war, plastics production rose on the order of 300% to 400%. The war ends, you have an industry that has vastly ramped up production capacity, and you have a consuming public that is suddenly flush with money. There's a lot of money being pumped into the economy. Bring these two trends together, and one of the results is you just get this explosion of plastic stuff. The first place that plastics go are into durable goods. They go into shoes, textiles.
Garments seen and unseen from head to toe, a synthetic symphony from DuPont's magic pile of coal.
Suddenly we have fabrics that don't need to be ironed or washed with all these, crazy names, Dacron, Orlon, appliances. They go into things like vinyl records. They go into Naugahyde furniture, cars. And then in the late 40s, early 50s, the plastics industry starts to realize there's only so many cars they're going to build. There's only so many kitchen counters they're going to put in. So they start looking for new markets. And one logical, potentially infinite growth opportunity is in disposables. It was a very conscious strategy. The editor of Modern Plastics magazine told plastics executives, your future is in the garbage can. So you get all of this packaging that's being developed because the industry is getting better at processing this stuff and getting better at figuring out how to make it. And from that point on, plastics industry growth is just a straight upward curve. It is nonstop ascension. At a certain point, you start to get single-use versions of what have long been durable products. It was a hard sell at first. We haven't had the luxury of being able to throw away a lot of stuff. When the first coffee vending machines came out, people actually tended to reuse the plastic cups, so they had to be taught that there is virtue and convenience in throwing away. Life magazine ran this article, Throwaway Living, and to illustrate it, they had this family who have thrown all of these disposable things up in the air. And Life calculated at the time that if this wasn't throwaway, that it would have taken the wife, because of course it was the wife, 40 hours to clean all this stuff. But, thanks to plastic and throwaway stuff, she didn't have to do it. What Life ran was the picture of all the stuff in the air. You don't see it all raining down onto the ground and creating this mess that is kind of a metaphor for the mess that we're dealing with today.
I come from 4 generations of fisher people. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, my dad, my brothers, and your whole life is centered around the boats and the fish houses and the water. I have a strong connection to the water. Water is alive, it's real, and it's like family. The chemical plants started coming in around the late 1940s, and now there are 10 chemical plants, nylon plants, fertilizer plants, and they all dump, on the average, 5 million gallons of toxic waste a day. For most of plastics, manufactures plastic pellets and powder. And for 27 years, Formosa has discharged right into this body of water. Corporations do not have a conscience. Their bottom line is production. Production at all costs. Formosa never reported a single violation. See, these are production plastics. They're probably polyethylene, polypropylene pellets. Whoa. So this is what has been out here, and it's embedded up on this bank. The fish, they're in their guts. The oystermen, when they're shucking oysters, they find them inside the oyster shell. Every bit of this is illegal. And that started in 1989. I was 40 years old. I was running a fish house. Formosa, they had managed to start discharging without a permit. And up in the bay, there was some sort of mutation going on with black drum. The whole side of the drum was rotting out and their intestines were showing it. When you're at the fish house and you have fishermen who come and want to get ice, and they said the alligators are rolling. They're at the surface and they're just rolling in the water. And then you have shrimpers who bring you shrimp and it looks like they've been stuffed with cotton. And then you start see where they can't even go out and make a living anymore. So all their boats are tied up. And then the fish houses, they shut out. They destroyed the community here. The community is no longer. You talk to any shrimper and it's like, my kid is not going to do this. And all you have are closed areas or shut down bays. Don't eat the crabs, don't eat the shrimp, don't eat the fish. I work for the end of plastic, the age of plastic. That's what I work for. We came out here every day for 2.5 years, and we got 2,500 samples of illegal discharges, and we took them to court. We eventually settled for $50 million, and we put it into every environmental project in this community. We put every penny back into the community to help them.
Some people have cynically referred to this as Cancer Alley, the greatest concentration of chemical plants in the Western Hemisphere. It also has the greatest concentration of cancer deaths in the nation. And obviously, the question of an association has naturally been raised. This is polyvinyl chloride, a synthetic resinous material converted from vinyl chloride gas. And it's the basis for thousands of plastic products, from food wrappers to phonograph records. During the manufacturing process, when the gas is being synthesized and the resin is being formed, exposure can present a serious risk.
Back in '81, you were doing the...
I was doing maintenance work, building the plant.
Dell started when the plant first started back in 1981. And so he was exposed since day one. And that was vinyl chloride and all that EDC.
Vinyl chloride, ethylene dichloride. I started getting boils on my neck from here, here down. Couldn't feel the bottom of my feet. I would grab my legs so hard that I left bruises on myself. I mean, I'd scream with pain. And at one point, I lost my legs completely, and I drugged myself around with my elbows probably for about a month and a half.
Yeah.
After they did all the testing, the doctor came out and she started naming off chemicals. And she said, "Do you know these chemicals, Dale?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I recognize every one of them that you're speaking of. There was 5 of them." And she said, "Well, they're in your body." And I asked the doctor, I said, "How come I can't remember my child growing up? You know, I've lost it." And she said, "Well, apparently," she said, "that's when you got hit with high doses of benzene." That's what the doctor told me. What Formosa did to me is unspeakable. It's, they made my life a living hell for me and my family. When you're on disability, you don't make no money. And health-wise, you don't mean nothing. They hire young people that don't know no better. Very little education. And then when they run into major problems, everybody scrambles, you know.
Hello.
Do you want to just take some photos, please?
For sure.
Take the car to get off.
Okay, so you're here to take my blood.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not a fainter, so you don't need to worry. Good to know.
We're taking a smaller sample than you'd normally give at a blood donation, and then that will allow us to have a look and see what actually is in your blood sample in terms of particles, shapes, sizes, that kind of thing.
Trying to get to the angle. You okay just holding the green bit for me?
Oh, sure.
Just so it doesn't move. Thank you.
We have 20 healthy donors. It is a blind study. We have completed nearly all of the 20 donors. So the next step is it will undergo an enzyme digest, so it's breaking down a lot of the biological material that you would find in there. Then they go on actually for a very long incubation at temperature to help further reduce any of the material in there that's not plastic. And then once that's complete, we can filter it, and then we can see what's actually in there that's remaining. We're then able to place it in this spectroscopy equipment, and there's a laser that's going to go through the sample and a spectra produced. And Kat here has a sample of blood from one of the healthy donors that we have.
This entire white object, that's the nylon, that's the microplastic.
So that is nylon in human blood. Most likely from, I'm guessing, clothes or carpet or something like that?
Textiles of some kind, probably.
So what kind of polymers are you seeing right now?
The nylon that we've seen today, polystyrene, polyethylene, polypropylene, polyethylene terephthalate, and then quite a lot of additives as well. So we have been finding some chemicals such as phthalates.
This entire thing here, all of this brown, is the phthalate.
So, for example, the non-stick that's added to your frying pans.
You found that as well?
Yeah, PTFE, the forever chemical, PFAS.
And so what are you finding on average?
In every sample, we found microplastics. It
Every
ranges from maybe 1 or 2 to like 11, 12, 13. So that's quite
11
a lot.
microplastics in a quarter of the sample, and you're only taking 10 milliliters. That's a lot. That's a pretty big plastic burden.
I guess it's inevitable these days.
Microplastics as a contaminant type are very different to other types of contaminants. There's not just the physical side of their presence, which is one issue, and there's potential to trigger inflammation type responses. There's also the chemical and the leachate issue as well.
Both the plastics and the additives can be genotoxic, so they can, for example, they can change the DNA, they can be epigenetic, causing higher vulnerability to cancer development later in life or even the next generation. But in general, the particle toxicity can cause low-grade inflammatory responses. In fact, we know that chronic inflammation is one of the biggest killers because it's a prelude to many chronic diseases. It's worrying, it's alarming, because if it's in the blood, that means, it can be transported to any other organ or tissue, from your bone marrow to your brain.
You would think that as we know this, that we would start making less plastic, but no. Plastics production continues to rise. Part of that is the advent of fracking, this technology that has suddenly released all of this natural gas. There's an oversupply, and that incentivizes making more plastic.
That is an ethane steam cracker plant for taking natural gas feedstock and turning it into plastic pellets that they ship overseas to make plastic. I think they fired up in 2022, and it's the biggest one in the world as of right now. It's ExxonMobil and a company called SABIC, which is a Saudi-owned company. It's a mile from our high school. It's a half mile from my house. 3 nights ago, it shook so bad that you could feel the house and pictures on the wall were vibrating. At certain times of the night, when they're in full production, you can come out here and read the newspaper. They've got ground flares. Those just roar like crazy. It's phenomenal as a layperson to read what their permitting was. The tons, thousands of tons of pollution that they're going to let into the air every year. Cancer is a real deal, and a lot of these things that they're releasing are known carcinogens. One of the products that they release in small amounts is benzene. The World Health Organization determined the safe level of benzene is 0. I have grandchildren. My grandson has asthma. Show us how good a neighbor you're going to be. Put some fence line monitoring. No, we're not required to do that. So we put an air monitor in our backyard. Of course, it's got a solar panel that keeps a battery in here charged. There's some sensors in the bottom here that pick up the fine particulate matter. We have to have some arrows in our quiver because otherwise you can't just say, well, I smelled something. And they'll be, well, what did you smell? Well, I don't know. So this at least analyzes it and holds their feet to the fire at some level. I love capitalism because obviously we all have to have money, but I think there should be a balance. People say, well, it's growth, it's growth, it's growth. Growth is not always a good thing. There's a lot of things that grow that aren't good. mildew, cancer tumors. I use plastic. You can't help but use plastic. But do we really need more?
Trash is not a pretty subject, so most of us prefer not to look at it or even think about it after we've produced our individual share. Ask most people how to get rid of it, and they'll have an easy answer. Throw it away.
In the 70s, there starts to be a concern that landfills are filling up and that plastic is a significant contributor to that problem. There's also growing awareness that plastic is getting out into the environment.
One material we can't do much with is plastic. It doesn't recycle easily. In landfill, plastic bottles remain intact for decades, contributing unwanted bulk to the layers of the earth garbage sandwich. Plastic litter is a deadly insult to the landscape since it does not disintegrate.
And so legislators are introducing bills to try to ban certain kinds of plastic packaging, like the styrofoam clamshells that used to be used for fast food. And in response, the plastic industry starts pushing the idea of recycling.
They're just one of several companies joining America's recycling craze. Some, it seems, to improve their image.
They also helped create the famous Chasing Arrows logo that you will now see on the bottom of all sorts of plastic packaging that identifies it as one of 7 types of plastic and that leads people to believe that this thing is recyclable, although in fact most plastic is not. Less than 10% of plastic worldwide ever gets recycled. Most of it either ends up in landfill or it ends up out in the environment.
The plastics industry used communication tools to make us think it worked. They were brainwashing us into thinking that recycling was sufficient. And they knew it. They knew it wasn't enough to work. The costs of the types of solutions that they're proposing are too expensive to do at scale. There's too much plastic.
It is predicated on constant growth. It is endlessly adaptable. Whatever our current needs are, you will find a plastic solution to that. Plastic is like the embodiment of capitalism.
Remember The Graduate, plastic.
I simply can't believe it. I just want to say one word to you. Just one word.
Yes, sir.
Are you listening?
Yes, I am.
Plastics.
Exactly how do you mean?
There's a great future in plastics.
Plastic changed a lot of the ways that we live. It has enabled all sorts of fast industries, fast food, fast building, fast fashion. It gets widely used because it's cheap. It's allowed a kind of material abundance, health, cleanliness that is unprecedented. But it also is a sort of proxy for what is the worst aspects of a capitalist system, where you can buy and consume and have no regard for the consequences of what you're buying. You can discard something and not think about the consequences of where it goes. If it ends up at a waste dump with people picking through, trying to sort out usable bits, we don't have to think about that.
This community is like one of the low-income communities in Manila City. And there are a lot of plastics because that's the only thing that people can buy.
Hello.
Hello, ate.
Every little thing. So everything here comes in little packages, right?
Yes. They need to like break it down in small amounts because that's the amount that people can actually buy, and with
because it's cheaper, right?
It's cheaper, yes, if it's in small amounts. So you'll see here, usually you can buy this one like in large, in bulk, but then they would have to put it in like small packets. And it's always sad whenever people would just put in like, oh, it's the consumer's fault, where in fact they're just actually victims of what is happening at the global scale, at the national scale. It's a very difficult situation for the country because we don't have the capacity and we have limited recycling facilities. We can't even manage the waste that we're already generating in the country, so we can't really accommodate waste coming from other countries.
Even if Palawan is a perfect paradise compared to more populated cities like Manila, there are areas where plastics would be everywhere.
What kind of plastics are you finding in this area?
They're usually the single-use plastics, the ones that are easy to use and then just throw away after. And then
they break down in the sun.
Yes, and that's why we're trying to look at how much plastics are in here in the water surface. And let's see what we got from the net now.
Well, I've never gone fishing for microplastics.
Okay. I'm gonna get a glass jar. There you go.
Okay.
What we do with the water sample is we send it to a lab.
Okay.
And then we try to identify what types of plastic or if they are really plastics. But based on their characteristics, they're floating, they're translucent. Visually, those are what you expect to see if microplastics get concentrated in this net.
That's so brutal.
Yeah, these are the ones that the fish eat too. These are mussels that we bought from the local market site. Oh, there's plastic. It looks like a shedding of polyethylene bag. When you digest the tissue of this mussel, you see microplastics float out and see the blue fragment there?
Oh,
that's
goodness.
plastic.
So the average mussel contains how much microplastic?
Roughly about 1 to 3 particles of microplastics. And we've been seeing that shellfish that ingest microplastics, they have reduced growth rates, so they don't grow big, and then they also don't settle that nicely in the settlement areas.
There's only one health. There's only one health. It's not only the health of us, people, the health of the animals, of the environment, the plants. And that means, that if one of these components is affected by microplastics, like in this case, the ocean, it has also an effect on the health of humans.
Bu küçük kranotomidonun bir de askı alabilir miyim? İpek askı. Today we will remove the anterior part of the frontal lobe, including the tumor. That's the only way to increase the survival rates. Okay, so here is the lesion, and these parts are the brain tissue, which still has normal blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is a kind of evolutionary barrier which is protecting the brain and our neurons from any kind of substance which is already in the blood, because neurons should work under very ideal conditions. If those conditions are disrupted, then basically neurons stops working. Mikromakas hazırlayın. Bende mi? If we find microplastic in the brain, then there are a lot of other questions. Does the microplastic cause any neuroinflammation? Does the microplastic cause any effect on neurons which disrupts their working capabilities? If microplastics are accumulating in the brain tissue, at some point they should cause some kind of neurodegenerative disease, like Alzheimer's or dementia. We already have a couple of samples from last week. We will get those samples to Sedat.
Hi, Zaya. How are
Long
you?
last. Good to finally meet you.
Yeah. Good to see you.
So, if you find microplastics in the brain, are you going to be scared?
Yes, because if microplastic can transfer from blood to brain, it means can transfer from everywhere to everywhere. So there is no barrier, there is no limitation for plastic.
Is there the potential of it staying in the brain?
Yeah, there is no other way. You know, it will accumulate there because the end point of the human body, there is no other places to go. The brain is kind of pure environment. You know, the plastics are not native for the brain, so it will definitely make some change in the brain. We lost our connection with the nature, so we are living in synthetic world, mostly made from plastic, made from oil and gas. The current situation with those amount of plastic that we generate as a waste and as a pollutant makes us Homo plasticus. It's not a Homo sapiens anymore. This is normal brain tissue, so it's like a space. Nothing, just some nebula. Yeah, look. You see the shape?
Yeah.
It's red, right?
It's reddish, reddish purple.
Yeah, here. So we can take spectrum. So when get rectangular, and then it means it's really focused. Here we go.
Okay.
Look, this is the first spectrum.
So is that plastic?
Most probably. We should take more
Samples, more scans?
More scans, to be sure. Because I will continue to investigate after you.
Yeah, after I leave.
Yeah.
Are you surprised by what we just found already?
Yeah. Because it's not something...
This should be there.
Yeah. Shouldn't be there. You know, it's a bit tragic. You are transferring microplastics, plastics, nanoplastics, and chemicals to your unborn generation.
Sedat, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So it's been a little while. I just kind of wanted to get an update from you. What have you found?
Yeah, but there is some good and bad news. It's good for, in scientific manner, but in reality, it's not really good news. In the tumor brain tissues that we analyzed, we found 6 particles. 2 of them are blue pigments. And those pigments used for production of plastics, specifically PVC plastics. So those pigments is kind of additives because plastics has many chemicals inside. It's like a chemical cocktail. One of the elements of this cocktail is pigment. It's really scary, but it's not surprising.
We're made of the world around us. Everybody knows that we're made of stardust. I think the strange thing is that we're starting to be made up of a little bit of microplastic dust as well.
We can't divorce plastic. It's too knit into every aspect, every pore of modern life. That's a kind of addiction. That's a kind of unhealthy dependence. That's a toxic relationship. And so I think the question now is, how do we manage and reset the terms of this relationship.
Right now, there's nothing legally binding at any level, not national, not regional, not international, that requires producers to actually disclose how much plastic is being produced. They don't offer any kind of transparency. We don't know if these materials are safe. We don't know how many of them there are. We don't know where they're being traded. So countries all around the world, but led by Rwanda and Peru, initiated this discussion to say we need something that addresses the full life cycle of plastics, from production all the way through to design, use, and end of life, and also leakage into the environment.
Rwanda, with beating plastic pollution, has come a long way. Plastic pollution was heading to a very bad situation, and the government of Rwanda decided they were going to do away with plastic carry bags in 2004. By 2008, we had our very first law against polythene bags. We saw a tremendous change. We saw cleanliness all of a sudden. We saw clogging of water channels stopping because plastics naturally clog the waterways. But we also saw development of businesses that brought to the market alternatives to plastic carry bags. So the dependence was broken slowly, gradually, but consistently. But other single-use plastic items now showed up on the market. Plastic straws, disposable cups, plates, cutlery, and changing the market to alternatives of plastics with such a small population is not possible. You need some critical mass of countries that are banning the use of single-use plastics to attract research, to attract the industry. This is when Rwanda thought it was necessary to engage with other countries to discuss this at a global arena. Plastic production has far surpassed sustainable levels. The quantities being produced today and projected in the future are simply unmanageable. The language we are using here is restrain and reduce the primary polymers. And this is no easy job, but we have to rise to the task.
There's a lot of questions that need to be answered in order to inform solutions, which include different practices by industry, also cleanup and policies to reduce or change our plastics economy. The Experimental Lakes Area Project is how we really, really hope to answer that. This is the first of its kind microplastic experiment, and it's a massive project. We decided to use plastic that was similar to consumer product fragments. They are among the most common things we see in really heavily urbanized areas. So it's polyethylene, this is polystyrene, and this is PET, or polyethylene terephthalate. This is what they use to make water bottles. This is what they use to make like a solo cup. And then this is actually what they use to make like a kayak. So we wet it, we release it underwater.
Yep, we got plastic.
And the purpose for that is it's meant to be in the lake, not flying up into the air. We'll do the addition for 3 years, and we'll continue to follow it as long as we have to. And so I hope that by doing this research, we can inform some of those solutions to actually remediate it, or to monitor it, or to prevent it from getting into our water.
We started this process 15 years ago, and we became the first plastic-free community in North America. We started with a water bottle, and this little unit, which has 5,500 fills of water, and we translate that into 5,500 water bottles that weren't purchased. It's been so encouraging for us to see the buy-in
by the citizens and the local businesses. Well, 90% of them have committed to doing their very best to becoming plastic-free.
These people are on board too. You can see our sticker on the window there.
Plastic-free business. Yeah.
And what we were able to do is to convince 142 community groups, not politicians, community groups, to get out there and do what we did. It's happening, and it's a groundswell.
Today we're going to go to Hanson's. We've done this event in the past. We're going to bring in these reusable produce bags here. Last spring we handed over 300 bags, so that was really good.
We're just handing out some free reusable produce bags. Oh, awesome. If you're interested, yeah, would you like to take one? Thank you.
So they're to use instead of the single-use plastic bags currently in the produce department.
Right on. I'll give you the medium one there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. Have a good day.
That's awesome. We're starting to get people to understand that it's a responsibility now. This isn't just an idea. This isn't just something that we can be doing. It's something that we should be doing.
So you're one of the establishments here that has gone plastic-free.
Yes, we are. It was difficult to get supply. It was costly, but over the years it's gotten better and better. A lot more variety and different items we can use, and we're at about 90% plastic-free, which for a takeout place is pretty good. There you go, Brussels sprouts tacos.
Thank you so much. Plastic-free tacos, my favorite kind.
Plastic-free tacos.
We need to turn off the tap. I think we need to dramatically reduce the amount of virgin plastic that gets produced.
We need to redesign hazardous chemicals in ways that reduce their toxicity. We know enough now to do that.
Knowledge is power, and that having literacy or understanding of an issue allows us to act upon it. We didn't get here overnight. We got here kind of one piece at a time, and we can sort of turn back the clock one piece at a time.
We know that our society can solve pollution problems. Our grandparents were exposed to pollutants that don't exist anymore because the human health effects became clear. Those chemicals were then banned, and the population was healthier as a result. We know what the problem is, not rocket science. So we need to get on with solving that problem in the same way that previous generations solved their pollution problems.